So we're recording this on Saturday, the 18th? What is it, 19th?
Sunday the 19th.
Today's Sunday. Oops.
Friday night. Oops.
Today's
a bit of a bender for you, wasn't it? It's Sunday already.
Just on the way over, guys, it seems to me there's something in the air. This doesn't seem like a temporary cold snap. This seems like a permanent turn for the worse. What do you think?
I believe so. I think we might still have that, like, quote unquote Indian summer here, the Babilato. Like
sometimes it happens.
Like in a couple of weeks, where we'll be like nice and sunny for about a week, 20 degrees. Oh, it's summer's not over. Summer's not over. No. That's the last.
It feels like this is the real thing, Josh. Are you an autumn guy or?
Well, no, not really. I kind of, it looks like the shorts are being packed away now until 2022.
I think I read recently that. Tomorrow, as we speak, Monday the 20th, is when the city is going to turn on the central heating for buildings that are connected to central heating. Good sign or bad sign?
It's probably about done, yeah, because it has to do with like the number of consecutive days.
Consecutive. What are you thinking about? We know what you mean.
Days where the temperature is below a certain threshold, and that's when they turn it on.
Okay, let's jump into the news here. I'll be honest with you up front, not the best news week ever, but real professionals can take something and make something out of nothing. But until somebody like that comes along, you're stuck with the three of us, which means that we'll do our best. Guys, let's start with crime statistics that came out this week. Dr. Mike, the police published stats for the last year, of course, very influenced by the COVID situation. The COVID situation kept a lot of people at home, which had an obvious snowball of knock-on effect on crime stats, a lot of them down. The center of town, which is typically the focus of most crime in the city because of the tourism, was down. So if you look at just the stats, it's encouraging, I guess, but there's a deeper story here.
Oh, yeah. Well, what the map also shows that we are alluding to is basically just the concentration of crimes that happen as well. And these are given in absolute numbers. So you still have your areas like the Old Town look like they're a lot worse than, say, other parts of town, but those are the only parts of town that actually go through. So you would expect, even though the population density might be lower, that's where you expect most crimes to happen of all different types.
Well, especially petty crimes, theft, pickpocketing, stupid fights, people coming out of bars. It's all concentrated there. So even in a year when the tourism is way down, the center of town is always going to be the focus of most crime in the city. Josh?
Well, yeah. No, I was just kind of reminded of those odd occasions when one's walking around on a weekend morning and you see kind of like splashes of blood on the pavement, and then some more a bit further on, and you get built.
Where do you walk around?
Kashmir.
Follow your trail home.
You get by kind of literally joining the dots, you get the impression that someone got absolutely smashed the crap out of, and then staggered their way home,
or walked into a wall with nobody else around,
all over the pavement. Yeah.
The takeaway that I got from this police report was that the stat that jumped out at me was for the calendar year of 2020, there were 11 murders in Krakow. 11. Let's call it one a month, basically, which is a slow weekend in Chicago, Dr. Mike.
A slow, cold weekend.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think for especially people coming from America who become numb to these, unbelievable stats coming out of cities, to have 11 murders in a city of, let's call it 1 million people, even during a COVID year, one a month. Yeah. I mean, so. Well, let's give credit where it's due. Either the police are doing their job, or polls are less murdery than other people. I don't know. You got a theory on this?
Less interactions. I mean, I would have thought with people stuck at home, there would have been more of those situations of like domestic abuse, people not being able to stand each other. I'm guessing those were a lot of those murders that did happen, actually. Like the random...
people who can't stand each other? You want to tell us something?
No, this is that phenomenon that was reported on quite often.
I think it's exaggerated. Come on.
But, when you're talking in a whole country of millions of people, then, a 2% increase in those kind of events is, it ends up being, dozens, if not hundreds of extra episodes of violence. I just wonder if the government was giving money to a lot of businesses that were shut down or performing poorly because of the lockdowns, if they provide the same kind of assistance to pickpocketers and stuff like that. Couldn't, their livelihood was gone.
I don't think they do. Something tells me that I don't think they do. One little extra thing I would add on to these police figures, this always pops into my mind when the subject comes up, and this comes from my personal experience. The police in Krakow, I can't say the whole country, but certainly the police here, will do everything they can before they officially file a police report on anything. They'll try to make it disappear, massage it down to something less serious. Once things go in the books as a crime committed, it's in the machine, it's in the process, it has to be dealt with. But up until that point that it's filed, the police have some latitude, and believe me, they do everything possible to make you reconsider or just go away, just do whatever it takes to not make them do the work of filing the report.
Unless you're riding a bicycle over the alcohol.
Well, in that case, Josh,
in the morning on an
death
empty
penalty,
street,
yes.
No, I remember like a year and a half ago, there was a party in the building across the street from us on like the top floor. It was like super loud. I could, with my windows closed, I could hear what songs were playing, people screaming, Okay, Friday night, fair enough. But, when it was still going on at about 3 a.m, I decided to call the cops. It was a little too far. The cop was like, are you sure? Like, do you know which place this is? It's like, I know it's across the street. I'm pretty sure you can figure it out just by rolling down the windows when you drive by. But how will we know which apartment? It's like, you're the police. You figure it out. Because they were worried they would wake up other people in that building by ringing the doors to find out which apartment that's in. I'm thinking, if they're not already awake... and he's like, will you come in to testify on Monday about this? I'm like, whatever. I'm announcing this. It's your job to drive by. Eventually, I did see a cop car drive by like half an hour later. The party was still going on. And I think they got into the building because some people from that party were coming out. So it quieted up around, 4 a.m. But
thanks, cops. Let's move on. Something else in the news this week. We've talked about electric scooters before. We have our opinion. You have your opinion. Let's agree to disagree. If you're a fan, well, some people are not fans. But there was something in the news this week that kind of brought the subject back at the front of the paper. The paper? Do people read papers anymore? I guess they do.
The front page.
The front page.
Website or
whatever.
paper.
Somebody got hit on Klimeckiego, which is the street, the bridge that goes over the river next to Galeria Kazimierz, not Dietla, but the other one that goes past Zabłocza and goes on to Lipska. That's Klimeckiego. Somebody looks like they took a chance that they shouldn't have taken, got hit by a tram. It was serious enough that they had to close down the line. Not sure of the status of the person on the scooter. I'm not seeing any reports about a fatality, so apparently it's reasonably okay. Josh, Dr. Mike, this is exactly the kind of ammunition that people like me use to make a case against e-scooters. People simply don't know how to use them responsibly. And, yeah. I
mean, the regular e-scooter kind of rider is the kind of person whose intelligence is that, hey, it's a good idea to play chicken with a tram on an
I can make it before he crosses there. Let's speed up.
What I loved about the articles I came across here is like almost none of them actually reported on the condition of that guy. It was all, this caused traffic blockage in the center.
He damaged the tram.
It made other people's life slightly inconvenient. Screw you. And actually, I am completely on board with that kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, bigger crime, riding 2 people on one scooter or riding a scooter while using a telephone?
Combination of the both would be the worst, but I think...
pick one.
2 people. Just seems more obnoxious and annoying. I don't know why.
What is it that bothers you about that?
Well, first of all, I hate e-scooters to begin with. Here, it's like another person waving their arms around or something like that. They have more mass, so if they do run into me or something like that, it's more painful.
It bothers me because I'm a rules person myself, and the rules clearly state 1 person per scooter. So that's the first crime right there. Secondly, you do look ridiculous. Thirdly, are you trying to save money on doing it? I mean, you're trying to save 10 zlotys by doubling up on a scooter. There's just a lot of problems.
And this isn't like a Harley Davidson or something. And you've got your babe on your back there, all tattooed. And
you don't look so cool. Doubled up on a scooter. No, you don't.
But I think it's actually, because the thing is, the rules that permit, or do not permit people to have 2 people on a scooter and bike lanes, etc., only came into play this summer, but only at the beginning of September did those also get transferred to the fines and stuff like that. So only about 2 weeks ago did the city start fining people that were breaking these rules. Apparently, like in 1 weekend, they collected like 5,000 zlotys in fines. Hundreds of people stopped, given warnings or made to pay tickets, from 25, 50, 100 zlotys plus.
Let's stay on the subject of transport for a second here, because last week, as everybody knows, was the European Week of Sustainable Transport.
It was?
Yeah, Dr. Mike, I know you had a big party celebrating with...
does burning rubber tires count as a form of celebration?
European Week of Sustainable Transport. This is where you see a lot of statistics about how there are too many cars on the road, about how many people support environmentally friendly alternatives to those horrible combustible fuel-powered engines and whatnot. Statistic came out that 62%, let's call it 2/3 of respondents people in Krakow said there are too many private cars on the road. Too many private cars on the road. And let's stop there for a second before we go deeper into this. Dr. Mike, do you agree? Are there too many cars on the road? And related question, is it your business how many people choose to buy a private car?
First question, I think there's a little bit that needs to be broken down there because you have to ask what the capacity of the city is for vehicles. And of course, even if capacity is A, there can always be moments of congestion because of random events or time of day. So, traffic is to be expected unless you literally have only 1/10 the cars that the city can handle. The argument that there are too many cars for what the city can handle can definitely be made. Parking spaces, especially, thoroughfares that just basically become bottlenecks at certain times of day. So we're kind of
which is most roads.
We're kind of on that cusp where I say there are too many cars for what the city can handle. That being said, if you can afford a car and if you want a car, it's your God-given right to get a car for me, as far as I'm concerned.
The numbers speak for themselves. And the same report says since Poland joined the European Union, 10 million cars have been added to the roads. Now, of course, that's not exactly cause and effect, but a lot of those cars would have been bought even if Poland had not joined. But we went from 8 million to 18 million cars on the road. 18 million cars on the road in this country.
In the first 10 years of the EU.
Exactly.
It's number 6, I think. So we're at 24 million cars right now.
And the road network has not doubled in that same time, no. Obviously. So, yeah, what you say about capacity is definitely in play here. Josh, I have to wonder about the methodology behind this survey, because the same survey indicates that 79% of respondents, 79% say they prefer using their own bicycle. Now, I call bullshit on this.
Yeah.
This is one of those questions where there's clearly a right and a wrong answer. You're not supposed to be pro-car when somebody's asking you about this kind of thing. You're supposed to say, yeah, I ride my bike all the time. I call bullshit on this. Why is it that people simply can't admit that, yeah, I have a car, I like to use it, or I have to use it, and, yeah, deal with it?
Well, yeah, no. I mean, it seems very odd. I mean, those figures are absolutely implausible about cyclists, really. I mean, as someone, I know you cycle as well, and I mean, I ride my bike, year round unless the weather is too foul. And there just isn't that many cyclists.
I'm guessing the survey was being performed, or they were questioning people right next to a bike stand. So, the sample group might have been a little skewed in that sense.
I agree. We've talked about this before. I drive a bit. I know you guys don't drive, but I drive a bit now and then. And I agree. The roads here are scandalous. The capacity is a joke. The quality of the roads is a joke. Yes, yes, yes to all of that. However, I don't believe, as this survey kind of sort of implies or suggests, that there should be some action to limit the number of cars. The government is supposed to say, okay, we've sold our cars for this year. No more cars. You can't do that. So we can complain about the road conditions, as I do, but what are we supposed to do? People want their own cars.
Well, I think, in terms of the city, they've probably done as much as they can to dissuade people from driving, in the sense that there is a finite and now smaller number of parking spaces, and they've strangled the roads, making it harder to move around quickly and easily in the city centre. And I think when you have a situation where kind of demand seriously outstrips kind of availability, then you just make it very, very uncomfortable for car drivers, and that hopefully dissuades people. Instead, they hop on a scooter or a tram or
a scooter. Wait a second, we were just bashing scooters a minute ago.
Or they'll introduce something on par with what they have in London and other cities, congestion charges. So certain parts of town will only be accessible if you pay extra for it, if you're not a resident or have some kind of other permit. That's also what I can see them trying to introduce in cities in Poland.
Yeah, and the congestion charge thing hasn't really worked in the sense of reducing traffic in central London. What it has done, of course, is provided an additional revenue stream for the...
And talked rich people into buying more expensive electric cars. So,
well, yeah, and that's the other thing, of course. In for example, in the West End, which is the sort of heart of the congestion zone in London, the majority of people who actually live there, who are entitled to some kind of discount on the scheme, are very wealthy people anyway.
There's one interesting stat in this report that I can't figure out. I can't think of an explanation. Maybe you guys have a theory on this. In Krakow, there are 685 cars for every 1,000 people. 685 for every 1,000 people. The statistic for Berlin is 320, and in Vienna, 370. So how is it that in Krakow we have basically double the number of cars per capita as Berlin and Vienna. Have a theory on this?
I think it's just certain cities in the West where, they went through their love affair of the car, and then especially in cities, they realize that a car isn't always very practical. That's part of it. Second of all, in Poland, they also mentioned this in the survey, there's a huge percentage of households that have no cars, so like 1/3. Mm-hmm. So the households that do have cars have like 2 or 3 cars, which is funny. When I was a kid living with my parents, we had 3 cars at one point. And there was only 2 drivers. So we definitely, pumped those numbers. So I think
you were killing the whales and the trees and exactly. everything, like baby seals.
We'd drive. My mom would drive one way, my dad would drive the other way, and I would just, leave the engine on.
How can you look at yourself in the mirror? And there's one final stat that also, this just doesn't sound right to me, but I don't know. It said in the survey that the average car in Poland is about 12 years old. 12. Now, maybe there's a difference. Here we are in Krakow, in the big city. More people have newer, nicer cars. Maybe it's different when you get out further from the city. But this just doesn't sound right to me at all. I look around in the parking lots and on the streets. I don't see too many cars more than 5 or 7 years old. Does this sound right to you?
Because one of the things that I've noticed as time has gone by and as I get older, I suppose, is that cars are much, much better made and much more durable than they were when I was growing up. And, in the 1970s, to have a 3 or 4 year old second-hand car, that was an old car. Whereas now, I still often see, say, an Audi A4 or an Audi 80, which is a car from the early 90s. And actually, they're in good nick and they look... they look reasonably modern. Not as modern as a brand new Audi, but a 15-year-old car these days.
Like that's basically a 15, 12-year-old car. That's a car made in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, but if they're saying the average is 12, look at all the new cars on the road. That has to be offset by a car that's 25. Come
exactly,
on.
That's what I was going to say. The averages are, we don't know what the medium here is. We need more numbers because just a handful of older cars can really skew the statistics.
I wonder if this includes fleet cars, especially transport cars, your big delivery trucks, which are typically older. They have a longer life on the road.
Those cars, it's because it's a fleet car. As soon as a new model comes out where, fuel efficiency increases by 5%. Maybe. It makes sense for them to replace the whole fleet, but then those cars can get sold off to the rest of the public because that's another thing. Like you have a used car that you say bought 6 years ago in Germany that was already 5 years old, and now you sell it to somebody else in Poland, so that car gets quote unquote like recycled into the market here in Poland, so it adds to the stats as an old car twice.
I don't know. The 12 years just doesn't sound right to me at all. But maybe when you break it down with some other stats, maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a way to 12 years.
Maybe there's still like a city of nothing but like 1980s Maluks driving around somewhere.
Let's move on to some COVID-related stuff. We learned this week that a coalition of hundreds of owners of bars, restaurants, and cafes from all over the country, coalition is suing the national government for damages inflicted by the decision to impose lockdown, the various lockdowns over the last 18 months. They're seeking tens of millions, actually hundreds of millions of zlotys in damages. Let's stop there. Guys, this is not the first lawsuit like this filed. The previous ones have kind of failed to one degree or another. They're basically saying that, COVID happened, but the government made it worse by overreacting and making us close when we didn't have to. Are you sympathetic to the idea, even if you don't think it's going to go anywhere?
I am sympathetic to the idea. As you mentioned, this isn't the first one. There are a lot of individual cases, but there are a few major class action ones. One with the tourist industry is one of those. Right. That was one of the first ones to do this. Transportation businesses as well. And now the services or food services industry is going ahead again with this. Their main argument is that the government should have declared a state of natural national emergency. And it was kind of like if there was a flood or an ice storm or something like that, then the government is given extra powers where it can financially compensate or close down businesses because of that emergency. But instead, they backed all their ordinances on the act of parliament that pertains only to epidemiological health issues and pandemics. And the wording was such in that act that, it says to protect the public health, how to organize hospitals and doctors and to take actions to prevent the spread of disease. But it doesn't actually allow, a lot of the lawyers argue, doesn't give the government the power to shut down businesses. And actually, this was something that was going on earlier when COVID started. A lot of people were saying, like, you can't fine us for being open or not wearing a mask because this act doesn't give you the right to introduce ordinances that introduce these regulations. And
well, there's the legal basis, and maybe they can make a legal argument, but then there's reality. And this, when you're suing the federal government for this amount of money, there are any number of ways for the lawsuit to be kind of derailed,
it could be derailed.
Undermined.
There's two parts to this lawsuit. The first lawsuit is basically saying that trying to prove that the government is responsible or is financially culpable for what happened. That's the first part. And then the second part is, if the first part goes through, the second part is for how much. And some courts might say, yeah, the government is responsible for this. They did it wrong. They are culpable.
A couple of things then. First of all, how are they measuring their damages? Do they expect to make the previous year's income into 2020? I mean, what's their baseline? Secondly, why should they be insulated from the consequences of COVID? Why should they be entitled to make the same money they made in 2019 in 2020, regardless of the global epidemic that's affected everyone?
Because businesses ended, not because 90% of people were scared, but because they just couldn't go there. There are lots of people that just didn't care during all this time. Underground bars, restaurants, people when nobody was looking weren't wearing masks, and I think that was a larger percentage of the population than a lot of us might realize. So if these lockdowns hadn't happened, they have to somehow prove that our business wouldn't have gone down by 95%. It would have gone down by, say, 50% or something like that.
So it wasn't the epidemic. It was the government's reaction to the
epidemic which caused the main thing. And the government will say, well, we have to do this.
Okay, so what about this then? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Even if we're sympathetic to the bars and restaurants and cafes and the tourism industry, okay, what about car dealerships? What about nail salons? What about shoe stores? What about video game arcades? Every business can make the exact same argument.
A lot of them can, and a lot of them have, because this is the third or fourth such class action lawsuit. And I think it's funny because I think actually one of the previous ones also included salons, like beauty salons and nail salons.
Everything. Anybody who sells something was impacted.
Poland's legal system isn't like common law with like precedents. So it's not that if they win in one court case and that can be applied to the other ones. Each one is individually, considered by the judge. Then it can be appealed, and it goes up. And it's even if one loses, the other one can win still technically. The thing is, you only have to remember in Poland there is no tradition of giving out like huge payouts. So even if the court decides yes, the government is culpable, shouldn't have done this.
Yeah, minimal damages.
The damages can be minimal because in Poland you calculate damages a lot differently than the U.S. where you can get tens of millions. In Poland, you have to really prove how much you lost, and then that's the top ceiling, and you probably get a lot less.
Basically, you can remove 3 zeros from any settlement you get in America.
Or like if a business here is asking for like $500,000, if they win and they get more than 20,000, I'd be surprised.
Exactly. One more COVID-related item having to do with vaccinations for school-age kids. The government has set up a program to, vaccinate the kids, but very few takers so far.
In Krakow, basically, the whole idea was there's about 200 schools in Krakow, give or take, with these age group of kids. And they want to set up vaccination spots in these schools. So, you go to your school, you would register with your school, and then they would have a set up place here. Turns out the interest was very low. A lot of parents didn't want to get their kids vaccinated.
What's the age minimum for that?
12 right now.
12.
So these are kids from 12 to 19 to get vaccinated at schools. Out of those 200, give or take, schools, only about 18 had any number of kids who were interested.
Wow.
And only a third of those are actually going to be vaccinating in the school. The other ones are like, well, there's only 10 kids who want to vaccinate here. We'll just send them to the clinic across the street.
As a doctor, try to put your own personal biases aside for a moment. As a doctor, would you advise any parent to have their 12, 13, 14-year-old vaccinated?
As a doctor, I would say they have to speak to their own doctor about this.
That sounds like passing the buck to me.
There's I have a bit of responsibility here, but I will say this much, that I'll throw this out there. When you look at the sheer number of kids in that age group that have become seriously ill or sick, it's statistically negligible in Poland. Yeah. If you compare it to other respiratory viruses, it's not zero, but the question is...
the stats and the facts haven't always been,
exactly. There's a lot of anecdotal information.
Josh, let me ask Josh a quick question here. Josh, how long before parents of teenagers are the next target group for the public pressure to kind of get the jab?
I don't know. I have to say that I've more and more detached myself from the whole ongoing saga, really.
You have enough of COVID fatigue?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of this bizarre kind of parallel reality where actually, I don't know any sick people. Everyone is just kind of getting along fine, but still you see, a smattering of people even out in the street walking around with masks on, and it's very odd.
Oh, I add one more thing. It turns out that almost already about half of the kids in this 12 to 19th group have been vaccinated anyway.
Have been?
Yeah. So, for me, I'm surprised it was that much. They're reporting as if it's like, it's shockingly low numbers. I'm like, really? It's
towards the higher end, the 17, 18, okay, I could get that.
Like, when you look at the age groups, it's probably like the older ones are like at 70%, while the 12 and 13-year-olds are at 20% or something like those.
Well, I think there must also be, there's an element of expediency about all of this, because in terms of travel outside the country's borders, then it kind of makes it a little bit easier if you've got proof of vaccination in terms of dealing with, different countries' varying regulations.
For practical reasons.
The UK is really going to be changing, apparently, as of like next week, its regulations when it comes for travel. If you're double vaccinated, you will no longer have to be taking a test pre-arrival in the UK, and by October, when you do arrive, your day 2 test will no longer have to be the PCR, but it can be just the lateral antigen test.
Short answer, Dr. Mike. Are we looking at a fourth, or whatever number we are on now, a fourth wave in the next few months that results in the kind of lockdowns that we saw last year?
Let's put it this way. There will always be waves. Coronaviruses of all types come and go and ebb and flow twice a year, always. So if we keep looking for COVID, we're going to keep finding it. The question is what the numbers are going to be, how severe the hospitalizations will be, and everything suggests that it's going to be less than it was last year. The one after that will be less than that one. Then the question is, politically speaking, will the government want to lock down?
Well, exactly.
There's talk about reintroducing these like red zones and yellow zones based on municipalities and counties, kind of more local area. And then, you might see that restaurants will be limited in their capacity, or masking might be more enforced. But I think they'll try that for a week or two. Maybe.
I agree. It's a political thing. Even if the numbers are the same or worse as they were a year ago, politically it's a different environment, and the government is less likely to take the same restrictions, or at least impose them to the same severity that they did a year ago, because they realized that it's just not doable this time.
It's not doable. People
it would have to be really bad, like 3 times worse than last year, for the government to say, okay, we're going to go to remote learning in schools. The stores are closed again, masks in public, that kind of thing. It's just a different political landscape, but we'll see. One more thing before we close up this short news. Tell us about Naked Guy.
I wish I'd read the news last week when we were recording. No, because wait, did we record on Saturday? Yeah, Sunday last week. And so it didn't break until after we recorded.
Yeah, right after we finished last week.
Basically out by the tram stop near Wanda, Kopiec Wanda, one of our better episodes, the Kopiec episodes. Tram driver is just looking out the window, and there's a naked guy there punching and kicking the tram.
Teach that tram a lesson.
Yeah, this is 6 a.m. on a Sunday, so I think you can start putting the details together. What kind of state this guy was in? The Straßmeister, the city guard, comes around first. Yeah, he's drunk. He's already ripped like the windshield wipers off of the tram, damaged it actually quite. Considering that he's punching with bare hands against like a windshield, it's already cracked and dented in some of the metal. Like, man, he's going to feel that in a few hours.
Funny thing is, I'm pretty sure that's the naked part that got him in the news, not the beating up the tram part. That happens all the time, probably. You do anything naked, you're going to get on the front page that I mentioned earlier that may or may not exist anymore. But
was there a scooter involved in this?
That would make a perfect trifecta, wouldn't it?
Maybe actually, I'm not sure. The report didn't say he was punching the tram and denting it. Maybe he was using something else there, getting a little frisky.
Remember the guy about 6 weeks ago, he was jumping up and down on top of the police car?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And now we have naked tram guy. Have we had any other individuals kind of acting strangely lately? Nothing comes to mind.
I just think it's funny that these articles about the naked tram guy says it's like naked man attacks tram. What was going on? Pictures below. And I'm like, pictures? And it's only pictures of the damage. I thought they were going to actually show like, from the dash cam of the tram or something, like some naked guy.
How drunk do you have to be to say, these goddamn clothes are pissing me off, I'm just going to take them off? How drunk do you have to be before you strip down?
Well, I know.
Naked?
I mean, there's one of our kind of acquaintances, friends, former expat kind of living here, who had a predilection for removing his clothes after a bevy or two.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was his thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Hi, Collins. Yeah, okay. I guess some people are predisposed. Okay. Mike, are you the stripped down kind of guy, or just the... what kind of drunk are you, basically, is what I'm asking.
Happy, giddy kind of drunk, usually.
Yeah? Well, there's the aggressive, what are you looking at drunk?
See,
there's the sad, crying drunk. There's the, what else?
I could never understand people who have negative emotions when they get drunk, why they would want to get drunk. The main reasons I like having a couple of drinks is because it gives me these positive emotions easily, or, everything is funny or whatever. If that didn't happen, I'll be like, why bother?
If we read about naked man doing whatever, we can be reasonably sure it's not you.
Yeah, reasonably sure.
Okay, Fair enough. Josh, what kind of drunk are you?
Yeah, congenial, I think.
Yeah, chatty
And slurry, and
not meaning of life stuff or anything like that. Kind of like, why are we here?
No, not really.
You're more like, I love you, man, that kind of thing.
No, not even that.
No?
Really. I'm just kind of
I think our
tolerant.
listeners can go back to any of our longer episodes, and after about the 45-minute mark, they can start deciding what kind of drunks we are.
Yeah,
fair enough. Well, that's it for our kind of sort of abbreviated news. Hey, it's not our fault nothing happened this week. We make the best.
We don't want to go too much into politics.
We make the best with what we have. Thanks for listening, everybody. KrakCast.pl, of course, is the website. Check out all of our back episodes, 350 plus now, which I checked. We've done like half the number that The Simpsons have done. They're like 700 and something. So we're catching up slowly.
And the couch is still in good condition.
Yeah.
Well, every week when we kind of run around and then take up different positions on it.
Oh,
while the
sorry, you had to
credits
explain
are
that to me. Sorry, yes.
Simpson.
Yeah, he would, absolutely. At this rate, we'll catch up in about 5 or 7 years, I think.
Hopefully our bank accounts will as well.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the news.